quite excited. We're quite excited to be here. So let's do introductions first in the room and then to the folks online. So I'm Terry Price and I'm the chair of the Access to Justice Board this year. So why don't we start at the end?
Hey everybody, my name is Vanna Singh. I am the newest board member, representing Tacoma, Washington, Pierce County, Southeast Asian community. Hi, Laura.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Chen. I'm also an Access to Justice Board member since 2021 and not 2001. It's sitting my time. 2021. Glad to be here today, be in Wenatchee.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Lucas. I'm also a member of the Access to Justice Board. In my 5th year on the board, I use she, her pronouns. And I'm based out of Seattle, but I work with a statewide program in Northwest Justice Project.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Terasaki. I am not an ATJ board member, I guess, here today. I'm the pro bono council manager working with the volunteer lawyer programs across the state.
Morning, everyone. My name is Jenny Kraft, and my company is JLP Solutions, and I'm the consultant working on the Hallmarks project. And welcome to Wenatchee.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Rick Felix. I use she, her pronouns. I am from Kitsap County, and I'm on the Access to Justice Board as well.
I'm Fred Corbett. I'm on the Access to Justice Board. I am a bankruptcy judge sitting in Spokane for my day job.
I'm Dave Keenan. I think I'm in my 6th year on the board. Maybe I use he, him pronouns, and I work as a King County Superior Court judge.
My name is Jeremiah Bourgeois. I'm the newest member of the board. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a JD candidate at Gonzaga University. Go Zags.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Singleton, she, her, and I work for the Washington State Bar Association supporting the ATJ Board.
Hi, everyone. Bonnie Sturgeon, also with the Washington State Bar Association. I use she, her pronouns, and I am.
Recording in progress.
Good to know. Good morning, Jim Bamberger. I'm the director of the Office of Civil Legal Aid. I use he, him pronouns.
So that's in the room. Joining us on the line. It'll just be easier, I think, if I just call on people as I see them. So Laura Berry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm also joining you from Tacoma today. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the annual campaign director with LFW.
Thank you. Judge Anthony Geip.
Hi, Judge Anthony Geip. I'm the District and Municipal Court Judges Liaison to the ATJ. I use he and him pronouns, reporting to you from Seattle today.
Thank you. Emily Van Yuga.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Van Yuga. I am the Director of Grant Programs at the Legal Foundation of Washington. I use she, her programs, and I'm pronouns, and I'm calling in from Shoreline, Washington.
Lily Sue. You just muted.
Lily, can you hear us? Can you unmute?
Oh, so sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Lily Sue. I'm the director of the Access to Justice Institute at Seattle University School of Law, and I use she, her pronouns.
Welcome. Sarah Augustine.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Augustine. I am calling in today from the homeland of the Confederated Bands and Tribes of the Yakama Nation, the Yakama Indian Reservation. I currently serve as the chair of the Office of Civil Legal Aid Oversight Committee, and I'm here today in my role as a member of the Appellate Justice Project.
Great. Erin Lennon.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Lennon. I'm the clerk of the Washington State Supreme Court. I'm here to present with Francis Adewale and Sarah Augustine on the Appellate Justice Project.
Welcome.
I was hoping that Erin was actually in the grad reading room at Suzzalo at UW.
And Kari Petrasek.
Good morning. I'm Kari Petrasek. I'm up in Mukilteo. I am the Board of Governors liaison to this board.
Welcome, everyone, to our meeting. All right, so first up are the March minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Are there any changes, corrections? If not, then I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move to approve minutes.
Thank you, Bryn. Second.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Jeremiah. All in favor of approving the minutes? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Great, the minutes are approved. All right, so the next item is the OCLA Director Search Committee. I'm happy to have my search co-chair with me, Sarah Augustine, and just wanted to give a brief update to you all about where this stands. So the deadline was last week for the search firms to submit proposals for the search. We got 8 proposals that are being reviewed this week, and the committee is meeting on Tuesday to make a cut about which search firm is going to lead the search for the new director. Interesting talking about the director when we have the current director with us. The other 2 things that I wanted to point out were, again, to remind people of our deadline. This search is going to be completed per the Supreme Court's order on November 17th, 2023, which means we will all have a wonderful Thanksgiving when the work is done. I think those are really the 2 main pieces that I wanted to cover about the OCLA search. Sarah, did you want to add anything to that?
No, thanks. You did a great job, Terry. Thank you.
Any questions that people have? All right, seeing none. Updating the hallmarks, Jenny Pratt.
Hello, everyone. I had the opportunity to meet a few of you yesterday and look forward to engaging with more of you as time moves forward. I wanted to just take a minute to give you a little bit of background about my experience in case you haven't heard, through the selection process of getting the contract. So I served nearly 2 decades as the CEO of the YWCA North Central Washington. I have experience serving on national, regional, and local boards. And I served on the Chelan Douglas County Volunteer Attorney Services Board while I was still CEO of the YWCA, which is how I learned about Eloise and all the great work that they do. Served on that board as a board at large, treasurer, and president, and resigned from the board to take on a contracting role with them. And I still do work with them, supporting the executive director and the board of directors, doing organizational development and board development, strategic planning, and that sort of thing. And in 2019, I started my own firm, consulting, and I have a few senior consultants and a small staff that I work with to do this kind of work. And so I'm super pleased to be with you today and to be working on this project, frankly. It's really close to my heart, as I used to work on the ground with clients that were in need of services. And so I have kind of a unique view of access to justice, and so that's kind of where I come from and how I got connected with all of you. So the project is updating the hallmarks in this calendar year before the end of September. And so we have been engaging with Michael and the disco group and have taken in a lot of information. There is a lot to know and to get up to speed on with the Access to Justice Board, just getting, getting a good feel for how everything is aligned as far as, the Bar Association and Access to Justice and DISCO and, all of the groups and how they relate to the service providers, reviewing the past strategic plan, reviewing all of the data that's been collected by all of the groups. So that's been a large part of the process thus far on my end. And we also have been compiling a group of our Hallmarks advisory committee or group. And, we got started just a little bit late in this process. So our timeline is a little bit escalated, I'll say. And I did bring some documents here. I'll pass them along if you care to look at them. But we've got our group of legal service providers that are joining us, some community service providers throughout the state, and a couple of folks with lived experience serving on the advisory group. And we are meeting and planning and discussing, and we're just on the verge of really getting out there. So we'll be having a statewide virtual event where we'll be brainstorming and talking about the hallmarks and about access to justice and getting, receiving some opinions. There'll be a survey, and the hallmarks advisory group that we've assembled will give feedback about what those questions in the survey and what the content of that statewide convening will look like. And then we will send that out to the larger group for feedback for a limited time. And so all of you would have the opportunity to give feedback about, the data that we're collecting to make sure that we're not missing something. And then that statewide virtual meetup will be followed by 5 separate targeted regional in-person visits where we've targeted rural and underserved communities in the Washington state. And so that might be, I don't know, Michael, we want to send these around and if anyone wants to take one of those. The regional areas are, we're going to be just going on a set trips, if you will, road trips. Where we're going to hit the Douglas and Okanagan County area is one, and then Lincoln and Spokane counties is another, and then Kittitas, Brent, and Adams counties, Klickitat and a portion of Benton, counties, and then the last one is a portion of Kalala, Jefferson, and Skagit counties. So those are the counties that we've discussed and identified and rediscussed and refined. And so that's what we've landed on. And when we go there, we'll be visiting community service providers like community action councils and engaging with service providers as well as folks who could possibly be seeking services. And then once we collect all that data, the next thing we'll be doing is working to create a draft of some new hallmarks. And that again will come out for your review. And then you'll have the opportunity to give feedback and engage. And then, as I understand it, it will come probably to DISCO and then to the ATJ board for consideration and feedback or approval. Okay, is that?
Yeah, it's a good, I'll just add one little bit of background that this is kind of a DISCO project, and the goal is not to say we think the current hallmarks are bad. This is hopefully to be seen as a first step to try and introduce more of the opinions and the voices of the people we are actually serving into some of our foundational documents. If you are familiar with the hallmarks, they're broad and they're all very aspirational, but they're very clearly written by attorneys or attorneys and other service providers. So instead of trying to just wholesale, revamp the entire state plan in one summer, this is a first step for us to take a look at getting some community feedback and really incorporating some of the client voices into our work in some of our foundational documents. So that's just a little bit of background, but Jenny's really running the ship here. I'm just along for the ride.
And then one other thing, after we get the hallmarks assembled, then my firm will be putting together a plan of considerations for the next steps, which are, as I understand it, a full strategic plan for the state. And that's a whole nother project, but we'll be putting together a set of recommendations and a package of all the data and everything that we've learned, and handing that off to you all for the next steps of the project and creating new next year perhaps. So questions. Happy to fill any questions. I did bring business cards, and any of you would be welcome to call me or email me at any time if you have something you want to add to what we're considering, or if you just have a question. I'm always open to that.
Questions for Jim?
I was just, so yesterday, the board split up into small groups and met with different providers yesterday, both legal and non-legal. And at least in our group, we mentioned this project and this, ultimately the state plan. And so I was wondering, because I don't think Wenatchee's in the actual road trip part, but I know there'll be a survey. And so I was just wondering for the survey, I know it's yet to be done. But if you're thinking the people filling out will be both providers and I guess the client community, or is it mostly just providers? And the reason why I'm asking is one of the things that we had talked about a lot was language barriers. So just wondering what your thinking is on that.
Thank you. Yes, I believe that we need to talk to both groups, community service providers, interested community members, as well as folks that would be seeking services. And so we'll allow for that. And we've used separate surveys for those groups, but I believe that we can combine it into one survey and collect the data that we need. And we have had quite a conversation about equitable access and language barriers, and we are working to provide translation in all settings. And so that's something we're definitely working to address. I think that it's kind of at the core of what needs to happen in order to create that equitable snapshot of how people are able to access civil legal.
Other questions for Jenny?
So thank you so much for the update. I'm excited to see the data and the information and the suggestion. You had mentioned about doing some in-person community meetings, right? Like 5 of them. Are those going to be like open meetings, or are they going to be specifically with certain organizations that you've identified in those particular geographic regions?
We're planning to set them up as listening sessions with community organizations where they will invite their constituency to come in. So it could be community-based. both folks with, wanting to access services, maybe they have, maybe they never have, maybe they never heard of it, maybe community members and those service providers. So, yeah.
Second question would be, I'd be interested to see if since it's a listening session, open, because I think there's maybe some opportunities for, maybe ATJ Board to be a observer or just a part of that listening. And because I think one of the things I really value from our meetings with our community organizations in the Wenatchee area has been just the pulse of the community and what's going on. And I just found it just so important for us to get as much of that information in terms of how we inform, how we center around our community and how we move this work forward together. So just kind of thinking about, not just my own single opinion, but thinking about like how do we actually de-silo some of this work that we as a working and how we can partner.
I love that. That's one of the things that we talked about in the Hallmarks advisory group, that, what is the time commitment for serving on this advisory group? And it is, a monthly meeting and communications in between. However, if we'd like to engage, when we go out to these communities, you're more than welcome. And I would say that, that is an open invitation to anyone here on the Access to Justice Board as well. Yeah, so we'll make sure that you get an invite out to those types of things. And if if you're in the area, or if you just want to travel, or, I think it's more than welcome.
And this is an update to the 2014 Hallmarks. I just want to, okay. And I just asked because, we have the enabling order for the Access to Justice Board. We have the 2014 Hallmarks, which is like a 2-page document. And then when you talk about a strategic plan for next year, like, would that be the new, I just want to make sure I'm tracking, that would be like the new state plan for the coordinated delivery of civil legal aid, like a new state plan? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Plus, we have our priorities.
We have our priorities as well, which expire at the end of this year. Yes.
I can add a little bit of background why I think that this all originated out of the DISCO group talking about a strategic plan for DISCO. And as we looked at kind of where that might go, it became apparent that, well, maybe coming up with that is a little bit premature and we need to look at some of these other things, maybe even the Supreme Court order before we really dive into moving forward with DISCO strategic planning. We should probably be taking the lead from the ATJ Board and the community instead of coming up with that on our own.
Okay, so this contract with you, Jenny, is just for the Hallmarks?
Yes, and kind of setting up for the next steps.
I have a simple question. What's OIC?
Sure. It's a farm worker training program, and it's statewide, and Martha is the statewide representative for OIC, and they do a lot of grassroots work, moving folks out of agricultural into other business training opportunities, and they help with homeless housing, a lot of social service work.
Thank you.
I was just gonna add a teeny bit more context to what Michael and Jenny were sharing, just thinking back to our existing Hallmarks and our existing state plan, that those were created at a time when it was mostly just the legal community. And I think with the last state planning process that happened in 2017, 2016, that it was, again, mostly like the providers and the legal community. And then I think there was some outreach to non-legal community organizations, maybe some client communities, but it was very minimal and, as you might imagine, not a lot of response because there wasn't much context. So this whole process and bringing Jenny on and starting with just our values and our hallmarks was designed to walk our talk around centering those closest to experiencing injustice. So that's why if people are like, hey, but what about the state bandits? We're trying to start with the community, and that's why through Jenny's work, we're going directly out to the community, both with the advisory group and then also through all those road trip meetings. So I just wanted to mention that we're trying to learn from our, what we should have done in the past and trying to do it center the community this time around.
Thank you. And it's all about evolving, you know, we're all sectors are evolving and becoming more aware of centering the folks and listening to the voices and bringing it forward. So I'm happy to be a part of that, and thank you so much for having me here today to give a little update, and I look forward to engaging or hearing from any of you as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. All right. Kaylee Carrillo, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we did do introductions. So if you want to introduce yourself, feel free.
Oh, thank you. Good morning. I'm going to keep my camera off. I'm multitasking as mom this morning as well. So thank you for having me. I am with AOC, and I'm a court program analyst that supports the courthouse facilitator program. So I'm just kind of observing just to see if any information pops up that I might be able to pass along.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And I did receive a request from Emily, since she has to leave early, that she wanted to present her part. So go ahead.
Thank you and good morning. Thank you for being accommodating. I was asked to come speak on the Equal Justice Coalition update and the LFW update because Alex and Caitlin were not able to make the meeting. So I'll start with the Equal Justice Coalition. We've got some exciting news there. The EJC just had their first in-person visit to the ABA Lobby Day since 2019. It was a great success. The Lobby Day occurred during the last week of March, and there were members of NJP, LFW's board, and other stakeholders present to advocate for increased LSC funding. And it was cherry blossom season, so a wonderful trip for everyone. For LFW, we just have a few announcements we wanted to share. One is that our race equity grant application process just closed on April 15th. We received 30 applications for that grant. Those grants are going to be totaling $400,000 this year, and they are multi-year grants, 2 years each. Right now, the Race Equity Grant Advisory Panel, which is made up of community members with lived experience, are reviewing those applications, and their selections will be shared by the end of May. Our next grant application deadlines are coming up in August. August 15th will be the deadline for both the partnership grant and the accelerator grant program. So stay tuned for more information about that. We will be reaching out to the ATJ listserv and programs who are doing this work across the state to make sure that everyone has the information they need to put in these applications. And that's it from the LFW and EJC side. If anyone has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer what I can.
Any questions for Emily? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but I see that we are joined by two new folks, Erin Shea McCann and Karen Pilar. If you want to introduce yourselves.
Happy to do that. I'm Karen Pillar. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Teen Child.
Welcome.
Hi all, good morning. Erin Shea McCann. I'm the Director of Policy and Systemic Advocacy at Legal Counsel for Youth and Children.
Thank you. Have you both? All right, so our next kind of open discussion is a recap of what did we do yesterday? A recap of our Wenatchee site visit experiences. We had a little of this conversation in our closed meeting, but wanted to open it up for discussion in our public session as well to talk about what it felt like to meet with community partners.
I'm wondering if it might be helpful for those who weren't in those meetings to just let folks know who you met with.
Sure. So like group 1, group 2. So for group 1, who was in? Bryn, Fred, me, Dave. So who were the groups that you met with?
We met with the YWCA, the Chelan Douglas Community Action Center, both organizations are community-based organizations that serve as community-based access points for access to justice, but are not service providers themselves. We also met with Northwest Justice Project's Wenatchee office and the Chelan Douglas County Volunteer Attorney Services Organization.
Great, and the other group? I'll look to you, Mike.
Sure. In our second group, it was Michelle, it was Terry, Diana. Dana was part of our group and myself, and we had the opportunity to meet with representatives or staff members from the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, WISN, was one individual actually from Seattle, because the Yakima individuals were at an advocacy conference, I think in Washington, DC. And then the afternoon, we met with Columbia Legal Services. We also met with Cafe, and we met with the Wenatchee Immigrant Justice Organization. And a lot of these organizations most of them were based in the Wenatchee area, but they serve a very large 3 to 4 counties. So it was great to actually meet not just the legal service providers, but also a community organization to support community members.
Thank you. Thoughts about what we experienced? Nothing like talking with my mouth full.
I thought it was great. We talked about this a little bit in our morning session, our working session this morning, that it's a reminder of why this work is important and who's really doing the work. And it was a reminder to us, I think, as board members, how disconnected at times a client in the field in Okanagan or Adams County, for example, can feel from the work that we do as board members. And we just talked about how we wish we could start every meeting with being in a community like that. So it was a wonderful experience. Some of the common themes we heard, at least here in the Wenatchee area, were the access to housing, how expensive it is to rent a home here in this area, how hard it is to keep their clients in homes. We heard about issues with referring clients to CLEAR and clients getting frustrated with trying to get into CLEAR, trying to get any help through CLEAR, and that's not an indictment of CLEAR. I think if just the comment was maybe CLEAR needs few more resources, but I think we heard that at least 3 of the providers that we visited yesterday.
Yeah, your comments on CLEAR, we have it on the agenda, talking about funding sources, and NJP is on our agenda. I don't know whether Cesar is going to be on the line or not, but that's the thing, is there any way to deal with the CLEAR issues when NJP is hurting on funding side? Because, CLEAR has provided valuable services across the state, and I think it's really essential to provide services in counties like Douglas County and others where there's not a big group of volunteer lawyers. And, frankly, some of these community-based access points were not referring their clients to CLEAR because they just couldn't get through. And I thought, hopefully that's something we can fix, but maybe it needs more money. I don't know.
Not a maybe. More money. Brennan.
This trip reinforced how incredibly valuable it is to hear not just from the service providers themselves, who are clearly critical to the conversation because they offer the nuanced insights into, what
what legal systems are not talking to each other, where do we have interoperability issues? You know, we need to hear the lawyer's perspective and the drug service provider's perspective as to what those barriers are. But the other half of the equation that we really need to do better on, if we're really talking about being community-centered and community-driven, is hearing from those community-based access points that are not serving as legal service providers. I mean, they have clientele who come to them and saying, we have a legal issue here, where do I access the system? You know, and these organizations, some of them have referrals and built into what they're doing, and others don't. And others say, well, here's kind of who I know who's in the community. And so it's this other half of the equation that I'm really excited about as a community-based health center person myself. And we had great conversations about how the Volunteer Attorney Services Organization is now working with community health and other agencies, and we're bridging a lot of those gaps from access points to service providers. So that left me really excited for what we can and should be doing, especially as it ties into the Hallmarks work that was talked about earlier today.
I just want to add something that from what you were sharing, Brent, is something that came up with our group's meeting with CAFE and Wenatchee Immigrant for Justice. And by the way, for people that don't know who CAFE is, it stands for Community for the Advancement of Family Education. And that organization grew out of WISN, the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. So it's interesting to find out how things were created. But one thing that they had talked about is their work directly with the community in terms of what Terry talked about earlier, of just reading forms that get a notice for such and such thing. And so a lot of their work they provide is just helping to read the form. But then as you would imagine, you read the form and then what? So they're trying to help people just navigate, you know, what to do next without giving legal advice. And so that was one of the issues we had talked about is what their role can be to provide assistance before they actually get to talk to an attorney or a legal advocate, you know, let alone just trying to access one. And but they're being worried that they're, you know, they don't want to get in trouble for practicing law without a license. So we just started to talk a little bit about legal navigators or something similar to that. And if there's something that the board and or bar association can do to recognize there's limited legal services, and so what are ways that we could be innovative to be working in partnership with them, because they're already trying to help, they just don't want to do something that's not within outside of a legal license.
I appreciate the comments that Fred was sharing about kind of the consistent theme around the inability of people to contact CLEAR, you know, to effectively interface with CLEAR. That's not a new theme. That's a theme that we see in every one of our regional site visits, year in, year out. And it's real easy, I think, to impulsively say, well, the answer is more money and more capacity. I'm not sure from our vantage point that that's necessarily the answer. CLEAR was designed to be a universal intake point for everybody. CLEAR is not perceived as being culturally competent or trusted by many sub-communities in the state. It's also created more and more frustration over time, how much time it takes to connect with CLEAR, and then the limited level of assistance, if anything, that is available through that. In a parallel environment, our appointed counsel program for tenants, we have been working with NJP to create, and the legislature effectively required us to create an eviction defense screening line. And the screening line number is on all of the mandatory notices for unlawful detainers, on the summons for unlawful detainers. And NJP, as it always does, was agile, it was responsive, and it built One of the things that we've done through consistent engagement, Michelle knows this all too well, is test the means, methods, and systems that the EDSL employs relative to the purpose of the EDSL. And we concluded that we didn't have the skill set to undertake a proper analysis. So we engaged a third-party consultant, Stout, national consultant, with great experience across the spectrum, including tons of experience in eviction defense, program analysis, design and analysis. And they are doing an assessment for us, and a comparative assessment of the manner in which the screening protocols are employed, not only at EDSL, but in the 4 largest other intake systems in the appointed counsel program.
Can you remind us what EDSL stands for?
Eviction defense screening line.
Thank you.
The other programs are King County, Tacoma Pierce County, Snohomish County. I guess that's it. We thought about doing Clark County, but cost-wise, we couldn't do it. And so one of the things I would suggest, and I have consistently suggested to NJP, is undertaking a third-party critical analysis of the risk on VETRA for CLEAR, the resources that are invested in CLEAR, the processes that are employed at CLEAR relative to the impact and outcomes that you're receiving from CLEAR. And that's unfinished work for me. It won't be undertaken on my watch, but it is, I think, before we start saying, okay, let's build out CLEAR more, I think due diligence requires us to say, are the assumptions, goals, and expectations that drove the creation of CLEAR in 1996 currently relevant in 2024? So just a few thoughts.
I do want to acknowledge Abby Keys is with us from NJP, and I see that she has her hand up. So okay, you're muted. No.
Still muted.
How's that? Third time's the charm. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Abby Keys. I'm at NJP. I'm the Director of Advocacy. And first, wonderful to see your faces. The owl is sort of nauseating. You guys are moving and swaying, but I'm hanging in there. I wanted to say that first, as a true NJPer, now it's been 18 months, for all of the anecdotal evidence of folks not getting through and folks, not being able to get through CLEAR, I do want to say that there are thousands of clients who are able to access CLEAR and get help and get screened and referred to other providers throughout the system. So that's there, that data is there. I want to make sure that I celebrate their work because they are a hardworking core group of folks who have been at this for decades, as Jim just shared. I agree with Jim that an external review would be really valuable for all of us to look at our systems, both as a statewide hotline and all the other ways that we should build up intake across the state system. And I think it's really important to note that as the system, the rest of our delivery system has been raised up. We've been able to invest in our field offices and invest in our VLPs across the state. We haven't grown CLEAR in the same way. I think we were all in maybe 6 or 7 years ago, there was an effort to undertake this analysis, this review that Jim recommends, and then pandemic and all sorts of things, and new exciting opportunities like the right to counsel and evictions. So that review is something that we are really curious about and want to make sure we will also take time and investment. But I really want to say that we should continue to build on what is working well and then continue these other opportunities to consider other intake models or other ways of getting into the system. But I am very proud of the work that CLEAR is doing under Eva Westcott's direction and Amy Vergrito, who's the managing attorney. They work really hard. They actually can't escape from the work to attend meetings and join us in these spaces to reflect. And so that's what I want to build in some time for us to do that review. And I really appreciate all of you hearing hearing from, it's wonderful that you're able to sit with community and hear from everybody. And I appreciate that it is difficult and that there is a reputation out there that we both need to contend with and help people get connected to the resources that are so rich in our community that we continue to grow. So thanks. And I'm happy to field questions, but I know you guys have a busy agenda. Just wanted to say thanks and for your support of NJP as we move forward.
And I just want to be clear, like everybody think that we talked with said clear is great. They just wish that their clients could access it easier, right? So I mean, I don't think anybody's saying that there's anything wrong with clear, other than you all just need a lot more help, probably. Jeremiah,
I had a question for Jim. You had mentioned in some communities, clear is not trusted. What did you mean by not trusted? And which communities in particular were you speaking of? If these issues are more in certain communities that
Sure, sure. So one of the things we do, and we unfortunately haven't been able to do it in the pandemic period of regional restart, is we go and do site visits in the regions where NJP has a regional office. We go to, we'll come to Wenatchee and do site visits in North Central Washington, and we'll talk to stakeholders, just as you did yesterday. We will talk to stakeholders. In Spokane, for example, we convened a meeting, lesson online. Stakeholders is not a preferred term because it references white European colonialists laying stake to claims of native land. So I checked myself on that, and
no idea. Thank you for that clarification.
so anyway, so in Spokane, we convened two groups. We convened a group of essentially African-American and African community members. And we just had an open forum about what's working, what's not working. And we chronicle these in our site visit reports. And we had multiple members say, A, the regional office isn't available to us, and clear is not available to us. We convened a meeting of Latinx and members of Latino support community programs. And we had very consistent, but the overlay there was immigration. And of course, NJP, with very limited exception, cannot do immigration. So it's just, I think you need to be talking, as you did yesterday, to the communities, which is what we try to do when we do our site visits, to the communities and get a sense of standing in the shoes of their members, what's working and what's not working.
Are there comments or questions about the site visits?
And I don't know, Ben, I don't know if the Southeast Asian communities see clear as an effective gateway. I just wouldn't know.
No, our community is still under pressure and fear those timelines. We are just in our own problems.
And that's one of the reasons, for example, that we have used a portion of our COVID funding to contract with Wyson to build out the legal advice and referral component of the Wyson hotline, because Wyson is a trusted enterprise within the immigrant community, in particular with the communities in central and south and southeastern Washington.
Yeah, so yesterday in terms of reflection, I think our meetings has helped in terms of identifying what should be ATJ's role in this work. When we are centering our work around community, really making sure our work is grounded in community. What does that community look like? And what are we hearing from community? And I just want to with so much gratitude for the people that who took the time to meet with us and to really speak their truth. And for the service providers in areas who have had to drive 2 to 3 hours in order to file a petition in court because it's not available by mail, or the challenges that are happening with not being able to access court documents because every single county has a different process of accessing documents. This is actually what we're hearing from not just legal providers, and then from the community, trusted community organizations, how important it is to really center around our relationship building, and to serve what I've heard, just earlier today about like our role, not just advocating, but also convening. And how do we actually de-silo the work that is being done in all these communities? And then also, how do we actually shift some of the resources that are available in the Seattle-King County and make it available to other areas of the state where people can barely get translated documents, where people can't even get assistance, whether it's on CLEAR or other types of assistance. I mean, if we are to be an organization that serves the populations who need the most help, we actually have to center our work with people and to address their needs across the state. So if it means that we need to do much more engagement, if it needs to bring people to these meetings, if it means to write letters, to change policies, to shift our focus, then I actually think that should be the reason why we are doing this work, why all of us are here and committed to this work, and we need to be centered around the people who need us most. I think it is really one of those things, we cannot sit around here and not think about people who are not getting served across the state. We cannot just let this thing go back to our homes and ignore what is going on in some of these areas across the state. So I think that there's opportunities for us to convene across the state, not just people, but also to educate the legal community about what is happening in different areas and educate about the issues, the challenges around recruitment and retention in rural areas across the state. And I think we need to start to shift the power to communities who are really doing excellent work.
A different point I wanted to make was that listening to every one of the organizations we met with, and some of the ones we didn't meet with, but that we didn't meet with formally, but we were able to meet with under the tent at the event. But from every organization, I heard, and I think others heard, that housing is a huge problem. And there's one way to deal with it, and we've been dealing with it, in working up eviction defense, but it's actually more than that. There are zoning issues. Wenatchee has a active mayor that's worked on these issues, but one thing, somebody was willing to donate property that they could do small homes, but the legal issues that went along with that prevented it from happening. So there are legal issues that have to be confronted. Access to justice, if access to justice includes having a safe home in which you can live, we're going to have to deal with issues we haven't dealt with before, not just eviction, but dealing with zoning issues, dealing with community organizations that are going to advocate to the city councils to make these places available. But affordable housing is a huge issue, and it's not just, I think we were all amazed that the cost for a one-bedroom apartment here is not much different than in Seattle, and the wages are less. And we were really concerned that people wouldn't go to the housing authorities for unsafe conditions because they didn't want their house to be tagged because it would be pushed out and there's no place else to go. This is an issue that has to be on Access to Justice Board's radar immediately.
Thank you. Ben?
One other issue that came up in our group, particularly when we met with the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, which it sounds like maybe it came up when we met with NJP, was for the legal services providers, their challenge of filling attorneys, staff attorney roles period, and getting people being willing to live in these different areas. And I wanted to mention it because Kari Petrosik's at our meeting, I know she chairs the BAR's Small Town and Rural Practice Committee. And we had mentioned STAR in our conversation with NERP, but just hearing you, Fred, talk about the affordability of housing, even for staff attorneys, because we try and say like, oh, it's more affordable if we live in, but it's interesting to hear that that's also a challenge. So we didn't obviously solve the problem, but that came up, we talked about that a lot. And I know Disco's been talking about that for some time, but that's something that I think the board can continue to work on.
Thank you. I'll just say that had an amazing conversation with Columbia Legal Services, talking about their lawsuits to improve lives for agricultural workers. And you add on that layer, Fred, to what you were talking about housing, when you start talking about that growers are supplying substandard housing and people are afraid to report them because they won't get employed anywhere else. And then on top of that, you add on this the true effects of the summer fires, and that the housing becomes inhabitable, and literally some growers would just pick up people and just drop them in the YMCA parking lot, like just drop them, move them out of their houses with nothing but what they were wearing, just drop them. So I think they're and CLS was very plain with us. They're the way that agricultural relationships are set up is the modern day version of slavery. And that this is what they're fighting against. And they showed us some of the impact stuff that they're doing, but they were like, this is absolutely a different version of slavery in our modern day. Really powerful stuff. Yes, to build on Diana's point, we were told point blank, for if you want to improve, or not improve, if you want to augment legal services in central Washington and north central Washington, you need a loan repayment assistance program that is more robust and that will encourage people to come and work here for several years so that they can pay off their student loan, just like they do in medical settings. So to the extent that our dear friend on the Board of Governors is listening, and don't worry, we'll be bringing that message back over and over again in different ways, but a robust loan repayment assistance program is definitely what's needed. Jim, and then we're gonna move on.
Editorial comment, I understand the attraction of loan repayment programs. There are actually other models that are in current discussion that some of us think might have greater value in return. It will require dedicated state funding. But there is a crisis. The crisis applies to civil legal aid, it applies to public defense, and it generally applies across the public attorney market with disproportionate impacts in rural areas. And so some of us are thinking about how could we build a system that basically effectively buys down law school cost on the front end, so you don't have to securitize it, and that allows that buy down to basically go away. It's essentially a forgivable loan that will allow the attorney, after X number of years of practice, to have it waived and stay in practice.
I'm all for a solution.
Yeah, because the big problem with law school, we all know, I mean, the last I looked, and Tara, you would know better than I do, it's the UW's entry level somewhere around $45,000 just for tuition.
Right, exactly. I will say that the community members were quite clear that a telehealth model solution is not going to work. That it doesn't meet the needs of the community. I mean, it may meet the legal standard, but for community members, they're not going to access a telehealth model for legal services, that it really has to be people in the community. So thank you, everyone. I want to move on. I have been texting our former leader, Francis Adewale, but he has not responded. So first I want to acknowledge that we have a couple of new people with us. I see Nick Larson, welcome. I see Shalia Stallings Ala Ilima.
I thought somebody else was here on instead of Francis. No?
Well, there's several people
Several of us are.
from the Appellate project, but I thought Francis was coming. And then there's somebody on the phone that ends in 934. I don't know who that is.
It says it.
But
And it says it's not George.
oh, and Cesar, sorry, Cesar, and you joined too. Okay, so Appellate project, who wants to take this over? Sarah?
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been serving as the chair of this project, and I would like to ask Erin Lennon if you would be willing to give us a summary and lead the way here.
Sure, happy to. And thanks everybody for having us here today. This is sort of a complicated thing to explain, and I'm not sure what level of detail is appropriate, so feedback welcome. But essentially this has to do with the process for funding civil appeals. If somebody can't afford to pursue their appeal on their own, how would they proceed on appeal? Can they ask for the money for that to be funded? Essentially, the rule divides cases into two types of cases. That's where you're entitled to review a public expense. So of course, if you're accused of a crime, you have the right to an attorney. Your appeal is going to be funded, even if you can't afford it. Same with civil detentions, dependencies, termination of parental rights cases. And then there's all the other cases, which is the reality of what we're talking about for a lot of folks on the ground. And in those cases, there's not a right now to review a public expense. But there was a whole convoluted system set up by which people could request for their appeal, for them to get funding to pursue it at public expense. It was a long, complicated process that took a lot of time for pro se folks. It was very confusing. It lacked transparency. And one of the things you had to do in order to get funded for your appeal was prove that you had a right to appeal at public expense, which sort of by definition, the fact that they were participating in that process meant they weren't on that track, where for the criminal cases, you would have that right to review. And so the court asked OCLA and the ATJ Board to look into this issue, to look into the barriers that there were on accessing the appellate courts in these civil cases. And thanks to the leadership of Francis Adewale and Sarah Augustine, we proposed that we start a real robust process for replacing that system. That would require deep community engagement, centering the voices of impacted people, and really creating a fundamentally different system. So we put a proposal into the legislature this year. Sarah and I have been talking this morning, and I think Jim confirmed that was not funded. So we're very disappointed in that. But that work continues to have a real fix to that system. In the interim, the Supreme Court asked the group, while we're working on a long-term replacement system, what should we do with the existing system? Are there some technical fixes for it? And I could go into great detail, but I think, we've submitted the memo, some of the memos that we've generated. And the problem is the system is irretrievably broken. And so the work group recommended you actually need to just throw the existing system in the trash, because it does not result in people being funded for their appeals. It's not transparent. People don't know why it wasn't funded. But the no's, the repeated no's, month after month after month, year after year, everyone gets told no. It's a system that wastes their time, and that does harm in and of itself. And so the Supreme Court adopted that proposal. And so the existing system whereby people could request funding only to be told no months down the line That is ending effective May 2nd. And so we wanted to make folks aware. But again, I'm trying to both draw back. I know, Sarah, you have to leave in a few minutes, so I want to turn it back to you in case you have anything.
Sure, I think so two comments that are on my mind. The first is that the statute itself made it appear that there was an opportunity for people to be able to, for indigent appellants to be able to prove that their case was worthy of getting funding. And in fact, that was just not possible. So it's not that that the opportunity is extinguished, but rather that the bad language that made it appear as though there is an opportunity will be extinguished as of May 2nd. So that's one thing I want to say. And the other is that in order for us to do substantive reform, I want to just echo what many people have said here today, which is that has to really be centered with systems experts joining with community experts of lived experience to determine what needs to happen in the next step. So our proposal was to the Supreme Court was to devise a process like that, where we would create a work group where systems experts would be joined by people with lived experience to determine what justice might look like for indigent folks in the appellate system. And so that proposal was part of the Data for Justice. It was in the governor's budget under the Administrative Office of Courts, and that was not funded. And yet we still have hope to carry that forward in the next legislative session.
Jim and then Jeremy.
Couple of points, just so everybody's on the same page. The Rural Rep 15.2. The group actually, in our communications to the Supreme Court, used the language bait and switch because it created, as Sarah so well pointed out, it created the appearance that if you have a meritorious appeal and you're indigent, you can proceed at public expense. But the rule took that away because you can only do so, and merits are irrelevant, if you have an underlying right to appoint counsel. So the language stricken in the rule basically takes away the bait and switch and makes it very clear. The only people who can appeal at public expense are people who have a right to counsel. That raises a grave systemic issue, which is worthy of the ATJ Board's clear attention. And that is, in the trial courts, what do we have? We have GR 34. GR 34 requires waiver of costs and fees that are necessary conditions and precedent to securing judicial relief. Implied in our appellate practice and in our appellate laws and in the Court of Appeals jurisdiction is open door access to an appeal for everybody from a trial court decision. But if you are low income and it's not a criminal case where you have a right to counsel, and it's not a civil case where you have a right to appointed counsel, and there are very few of those ITAs, tenant right to counsel or appointed counsel, children's and parents' right to appointed counsel in the child welfare space, etc. If it doesn't fall in any of those, then the rules of the Supreme Court are categorically denying access to appellate justice for all low-income people. And that needs to be addressed. That's the process that the group recommended to the Supreme Court be undertaken to figure out where, when, and how, outside of the categories of cases that are currently listed. And unfortunately, it's our understanding that the legislature didn't fund the process, but that doesn't mean that the conversation ends. I encourage us to recognize that the conversation is only beginning. And I really want to thank Erin Lennon for really bringing this entire problem to this community.
Were there any issues with respect to a party having to demonstrate probable merit? I'm trying to imagine how some pro se litigant demonstrates that in an affidavit that what they want reviewed as probable merit when they have really no understanding of the law. How do you convince a judge of that? And so my question is, was that an issue also that the group wanted to have addressed or brought before the court, or is that something that didn't come before?
Aaron, please.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. How does one show probable merit at the beginning of the case? Unfortunately, because they had to prove not only probable merit, but they had to show that they had this right to review a public expense, no matter how much they proved, even if they did show probable merit, those folks who did, unless they could provide a sophisticated legal argument as to why they had the right to review a public expense when the law says they don't. We didn't even really get to the point of analyzing whether they had probable merit. But I think when we come up with a replacement system, that's a key point to bring in. What does it look like to screen for probable merit at the beginning of the case? And so I think absolutely the replacement system will have to address that issue. But in the current system, it was something that was time consuming for appellants as they attempted to show that, not knowing that the next thing they had to show, the right to review a public expense, was going to be an even bigger hurdle.
Sure.
And I just want to say thank you for all of your work on this. You know, I'm a Superior Court judge and I don't have the discretion to not consider these motions when they come to me. And yet I know what the result in the end is going to be, and it's frustrating because I want those individuals to be able to vindicate their important rights, to have representation at the appellate level. And, you know, and I enter these findings, but I know what's going to happen with them ultimately. So I'm really glad that you're doing this work.
Any other comments about this? Sarah.
I just want to make one final plug here. It is so tempting when well-prepared, well-meaning systems experts are in positions to make decisions. It is so tempting to just make the best decision for everyone. We're all tempted to do that, especially in a context like this where we asked the legislature to fund our process and they didn't. And yet I just want to reiterate how important it is for these decisions to be made in relationship with community members, because as systems experts, it's very hard to know what we don't know. And so it's very easy to adjust the system that replaces an old system that really replicates the same kind of issues. So I just want to once again encourage us to not lose heart. We are all here. We can keep going together and fight another day for access to justice for pro se litigants. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you all for working on this, and this will remain on our agenda as we push forward and see about bringing it back next year. All right, I don't believe that, so Alex is not here, so I don't think we're going to have an EJC update, is that correct? And Emily touched on it, the 88 days. Yes. Cesar.
Yeah, I know that Alex was not attending, and I could try to fill in for her in terms of the EJC update, which was and is focused on the recent trip to DC. The EJC made its triumphant return to DC after the pandemic. The last time that folks had been there was in 2019, so it's been quite a while. The delegation was comprised of Sean Davis, who's LFW chair, Anthony Powers on the LFW board, Kara Masters, who is chair of the EJC, and we were able to, I'm sorry, I'm having a little blank of a name. Bill Pickett, former WISBA president, practicing in Yakima, also attended and also participated. And the trip was, because it was earlier than usual, the scheduling was a little complicated. So we got to meet with about a little less than half of actual members of the delegation, and then the other half we met with staff, who was very engaged. We did meet with Senator Cantwell. We met with Representative Del Bene. We met with we had to split up for a couple of visits, so there were a few more representatives that we met with. I apologize, I didn't have it handy, but I think overall it was a really good trip. An important meeting was the meeting with Senator Murray's staffers, given her position as chair of budget, and there has been some prior engagement with Senator Murray on this issue. On the issue of funding, and she had two of her high-level staff members meet with the delegation. So really good trip. I think the foundation already sent the little newsletter, with more details on it in case I missed anything. The gist of it, and I guess my add-on as far as the federal funding situation right now, is that the only real development in that front is that the administration has requested an $800 million funding level for the Federal Legal Services Corporation, which would be, excuse me, a significant increase from the current funding level, 560. And we have yet to hear from either of the chambers. I think it's really important that this marker is out there. It's really the first time this past year and this year where we're seeing significant notable increases, or at least increased requests, certainly from the administration. The Legal Services Corporation is asking for more, than $1.3 billion, I should say. So it's far short of what the corporation has determined is needed. It is a little bit unnerving, the prospects of the budget processes, not only because of the debt ceiling standoff right now, but also just even if we get past this, what the budget might look like for 2024. But hopefully we've done at least contributed to making sure that folks in our delegation are all on board, which I don't know that they all are, but the other piece is that Representative Kilmer visited the Tacoma office. He is on the Appropriations Committee in the House, and he on his own reached out to NJP's Tacoma office, and he wanted to meet with the office to understand, and as he put it, better arm himself with the information of what's happening on the ground, in order to be better able to support increased funding for legal aid in the committee. And we had a very good session. He asked a lot of questions with he and his staff. That took place in Tacoma about 10 days ago or so. I think that's it on those two fronts. Obviously, by the way, Caitlin Carlson, myself has support for the team on the trip. I also participated. We also did meet with Marie Glussenkamp from the 3rd District, which was quite nice. And that's all I got.
Great, thank you very much. Questions for Susan? We'll all be watching the debt ceiling discussions. state level funding. Jim?
Sure. Well, it was a pretty good session for all of the legal aid requests that we submitted. I sent out to the general community an outline of what the final budget held. I want to just flag the highlights of the 4.4 million that we were appropriated for what is known as a vendor rate adjustment. 900,000 of that fully funds the request that we got from the Pro Bono Council and the EJC to meet increased costs experienced by the volunteer and specialty legal aid programs that are funded through an OCLA approved subcontract between Northwest Justice Project and the Legal Foundation, and which flows from the Legal Foundation to those programs. So that is the first meaningful vendor rate adjustment that those programs have received on the state funded side in many, many years. Legislature fully funded the appointed counsel program for tenants, and that will allow us to continue to implement that program. We're still making a range of adjustments in our approaches based on what we're learning. We said at the very beginning of that program that what it looks like on day one isn't going to be what it looks like at the, down the road. We were under the gun, and NJP was under the gun, and our other providers were under the gun to get capacity out there. We're now managing that capacity, adjusting that capacity, and adding capacity. Shout out on that program, by the way, to our friends at NJP. Huge victory yesterday. Huge victory yesterday. Michelle, I'll let you talk about it because it's like, it's the first time somebody actually read the statute and case law. Anyway, so that program got fully funded. We secured funding, full funding for the continued implementation of a 6-year statutory mandate to make children's representation universal throughout the state, and we have to do it on a county by county basis. We are in the process of standing up our third cohort of counties. In addition, the legislature listened to us and to the Office of Public Defense in response to our concerns about recruitment and retention, given the woefully low compensation rates that we pay for our contracted lawyers. And so we got a 17% year one increase in compensation for our children's attorneys and a 13.5% increase on top of the 17% for year two. Critically important, and that will help us a lot as we continue to look for new lawyers and keep the lawyers that we have. The legislature also fully funded continuation of a program of what we call the pre-RTC eviction defense program, which was funded last year on a one-time basis. It is now a continuing basis, and it also allows us to permanently move funding over to the EDSL, eviction defense screening line, to allow NJP to manage the demand that comes not from people who are currently eligible for appointed counsel because they don't have cases filed against them, but who are still calling the eviction defense screening line in large measure because it's right there on the notices that landlords are supposed to give them. And so we moved funding over for that. The legislature fully funded that. And then we continued funding for all of our other programs. So it was really quite a successful session for us. And it, I think, puts our agency and the programs that we fund on a stable footing, or as stable a footing as we can, going into the director transition and the next biennial session.
Thank you very much. So I want to acknowledge our old friend, Francis Adewale. Welcome. It's great to have you. We did already cover the appellate project. Thank you, Erin Lennon. I think she has signed off. But to finish, did you want to just say something, 30 seconds on your program's win yesterday?
I would love to. Thanks, Terry, and thanks, Jim, for setting it up. I was gonna try to do something in the announcements anyways, because I'm just so excited about it. As Jim mentioned, so I'm the managing attorney for Northwest Justice Project's eviction prevention unit. And we had a huge win in Division 3 yesterday. It was a Spokane case with an elderly disabled client who was evicted at a show cause hearing. And there were numerous issues of fact that were alleged at the show cause hearing, but the court went forward with the eviction and didn't set the case for trial. And Division 3 overturned that decision, remanded it back to the Superior Court, saying that they should have set a trial. And it's a really good example of the ways that landlords have they've just rolled through the court system all this time. This is a case that the client clearly needed help. It's not a subsidized housing case, though. It's not something that with really limited resources would have been prioritized through our full representation case. And it's going to change how eviction cases move through not just the Spokane court, but the other courts in the division. And so it's going to be, it's a huge change that wouldn't happen if we didn't have a right to counsel for tenants in Washington. And so just really exciting news. Trial court was Assistant Managing Attorney Chris Brunetti on the Northwest Justice Project, and it was co-counseled by Chris Brunetti and Tyler Graber out of our Olympia office on appeal.
Excellent. So we are wrapping up. It is right at 11:30. I wanted to open this up for.
I just want to know Laura Berry is also on the.
Oh, sorry, Laura. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to skip you. Yes, please go ahead.
Quite all right. Thank you. Yeah, just a very quick update on behalf of the Campaign for Equal Justice. Keep an eye out on our upcoming monthly newsletters where you'll find save the date opportunities, more opportunities after this meeting, but before the conference in September to come together at our happy hour series, Beer and Justice, or if you're in Tacoma, Wine and Justice. Those events will kick off in June and continue mostly through the summer, wrapping up with our final event in Olympia in November. So please keep an eye out and please plan and come to join us. Those are, from what I understand, I'm new to the team, but they look like a lot of fun. So we'll hope to see you there. You'll hopefully also be noticing some exciting new changes with our corporate campaign. Of course, events like Beer and Justice and the Goldmark Lunch benefit substantially from corporate sponsorships. What our campaign co-chairs would like to see us do next is further engage our community of corporate counsel and deepen engagement with those prospective new supporters. So you're going to see that on the horizon too. I've got meetings coming up soon with the co-chairs of our associates and law firm campaigns to try to plant the seeds for a strong year on those fronts as well. And of course, LAFCO is meeting. The next meeting will be on Thursday, May 18th, and you're welcome to join us. It's a lunchtime program over Zoom. So that's it for me. Thanks for my time.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. And other announcements, I will say, following on what Laura said, remind people, and it's at the bottom of our agenda, that we will be in Tacoma at the end of September, September 28th to 30th for the Access to Justice Conference. A reminder also that we have open right now, we are going to have 2 board member slots come available in October when we will need to find successors for our own Michelle Lucas and Fred Corbett. So please spread the word. The word is out there, but spread the word on so that we can get applications for those 2 board spots. Any other announcements that people have?
I just want to encourage people from all over the state to apply for those. I know we're in Wenatchee today. We don't have that many local folks left in the meeting, but for people who are in different areas of the state that aren't represented by the board, Central Washington, Southwest Washington, Southeast Washington, we really want to make sure that we're getting more geographic diversity so that well, we love these road trips and we'll keep doing them, but it's great to have the constant feedback from people who are in those communities, in these communities.
Absolutely, thank you. All right, any last? Oh, Lily. Oh, I see Abby pointing that way. And Lily, yes.
Thanks, Terry. So just very, very quickly, Seattle University, our law school is still actively seeking applications for a combined associate director position for the Access to Justice Institute and the Center for Professional Development. So if any of you know a Washington licensed attorney that enjoys working with students, enjoys public interest in social justice, and also promoting small firm and solo practice, please encourage them to apply. And anyone is welcome to contact me or my counterpart in Matt Etter at the Center for Professional Development if they're interested. So thanks very much.
And your email address is?
lsu@seattleu.edu, and I can add it to the chat.
Excellent.
We'll have a law degree.
Oh, yes, yes, when you grow up and have a law degree, will be faster than you think. All right. Okay, well, thank you all. That concludes the public session. We will be here this afternoon having our ATJ board retreat. And take good care.
Thank you.
Is the break and the check-in one and the same?
No.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
Okay, cool. We got an hour.
She's an expert. She's consistent. And from